In the early morning hours of September 17, 1850, a group of men armed with guns surrounded a house in St. Louis, Missouri. Their target was a runaway slave named Scott, who had been living in the house with a free black family for several weeks. As the men burst into the home, a local abolitionist named Rose Greenhow jumped out of an upstairs window and made her way to a waiting wagon. She then drove Scott to freedom in Canada. Along the way, they stopped at a farmhouse to rest where Greenhow left the next day for Chicago to assist other fugitives. The farmer noticed that one of his pigs was missing and assumed it had been stolen by Scott, so he returned home and put the chase on. But when he arrived in town, the police had already arrested Scott and were taking him back to Missouri. After hearing about this, Greenhow went to the jail and bribed the sheriff to let Scott go. In return, the sheriff got a job with Greenhow's father-in-law. She then escorted Scott all the way to Canada. This episode is only one of many similar tales of daring rescues, escapes, and acts of resistance along what we today call the Underground Railroad. At its core, the Underground Railroad was not a physical railroad, but a secret network of routes, people, and safe houses used to help enslaved people escape from the South to the North or to Canada. And while there were countless people involved, some names stand out more than others. Harriet Tubman. Born into slavery in Maryland around 1820, Harriet Tubman would go on to lead more than 300 fugitives to freedom using secret routes known as the Underground Railroad. She earned the nickname Moses for her leadership and ability to guide her people out of bondage. Tubman was also a spy for the Union Army during the Civil War. After escaping from slavery, she returned to the South several times, once famously leading a group of over 700 slaves to freedom in Florida. Though she always traveled with weapons and had fought back against slave catchers in the past, Tubman never killed anyone herself. "I never took a life," she said, "but I did take property. I have been known to steal a horse, saddle, and bridle and put them in the hands of the riders." Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass was born into slavery in Maryland. He learned to read and write in secret and eventually escaped to New York in 1838. He joined the growing abolitionist movement and spent the next 2 decades traveling around the country giving speeches that inspired many Northerners to oppose slavery. During this time, he also published 3 successful autobiographies, which are still read today. One of his most famous speeches was his July address, in which he declared that the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were both a promissory note and a national crime. William Still, a Pennsylvania native, William Still was one of the founders of the Pennsylvania Hall Association, an important stop on the Underground Railroad. Through his work, he helped at least 800 enslaved people escape to freedom. Still kept detailed records of each person he assisted, including their names, ages, occupations, where they were born, and where they went after escaping. This record-keeping made him an important resource for those tracing their family history. His records are now housed at the Moorland Spingarn Research Center at Howard University. John Brown. John Brown was a man on a mission. After witnessing the brutal treatment of slaves firsthand as a young man, he devoted his life to ending slavery. He became increasingly convinced that violence was necessary to achieve this goal. In 1859, Brown and his sons, along with several allies, seized the federal armory at Harper's Ferry, Virginia, in an attempt to start a slave rebellion. But the plan failed and Brown was charged with treason and hanged. Nevertheless, his actions inspired many Northerners to join the fight against slavery. Isaac Hopper. A religious leader and social reformer, Isaac Hopper helped to found the American Peace Society and served as its president for 25 years. He also played a key role in the Philadelphia Society for the Abolition of Slavery and helped to organize the Vigilance Committee of 1838, which provided food, clothing, and shelter to runaway slaves. Hopper was also active in the women's suffrage movement and was a founding member of the Pennsylvania Hall Association. Henry Ward Beecher. Perhaps the most famous of the Underground Railroad conductors, Henry Ward Beecher, was a popular congregational minister in Brooklyn during the mid-19th century. Beecher was a powerful speaker who attracted large crowds to his sermons on social reform topics such as slavery. In addition to preaching, however, he also aided fugitives on their way to freedom. According to legend, he once hid a fugitive in a coffin to evade slave catchers. Levi Coffin. Known as the president of the Underground Railroad, Levi Coffin was a man who literally helped run the network. Along with his wife, Catherine, they operated a station on the Underground Railroad in Newport, Indiana. Over the course of several decades, they personally helped more than 2,000 enslaved people escape to freedom, making their home a major hub for the operation. They also welcomed visitors such as Frederick Douglass and John Brown, who stayed with the Coffins while planning their anti-slavery activities. Thomas Garrett. Thomas Garrett was a wealthy merchant who lived in Newcastle, Delaware. He used his fortune to help runaway slaves escape to freedom. Garrett was a member of the Executive Committee of the Anti-Slavery Society of Pennsylvania and helped to establish the Delaware State Prison Association to improve conditions for prisoners. He also donated money to build schools and churches in Liberia. James Redpath. James Redpath was a journalist and historian who was born in Scotland. He came to the United States in 1848 and became involved in the abolitionist movement. Redpath wrote several books about slavery, including The Abolition of Slavery in the United States, which was published in 1865. He also traveled around the country giving speeches on behalf of the Liberty Party. Charles Turner. Charles Turner was a black man who lived in Cincinnati, Ohio. He was a member of the Ohio Vigilance Committee and helped to smuggle many runaway slaves into Canada. Turner also served as an agent for the Underground Railroad, which meant that he was responsible for transporting people from one station to the next. He often had to travel at night and in disguise to avoid detection by slave catchers. Jerry N. Smith. Jerry N. Smith was a white man who lived in Detroit, Michigan. He was a member of the Detroit Underground Railroad and helped to hide runaway slaves in his basement. Smith also provided food and supplies to those who were escaping slavery. He was also an active member of the Michigan Anti-Slavery Society. Robert Purvis. Robert Purvis was a wealthy white man who lived in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He was a member of the Executive Committee of the Pennsylvania Abolition Society and helped to smuggle many runaway slaves out of the South. Purvis also donated money to anti-slavery organizations and helped to establish the Pennsylvania Hall Association. Turney, also spelled Turney, was a black woman who lived in St. Louis, Missouri. She was a member of the St. Louis Anti-Slavery Society and helped to hide runaway slaves in her home. Terry was also an active member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, which had a number of stations along the Underground Railroad. As you can see, there were many brave individuals who risked their lives and livelihoods to help end slavery in the United States. These are just a few of the heroes of the Underground Railroad. Their bravery and dedication helped to bring freedom to thousands of enslaved people. The primary sources used for this episode include Tubman's 1869 autobiography scenes in the life of Harriet Tubman, written with the assistance of an editor, the papers of William Still held by the Moreland Spingarn Research Center at Howard University, and the papers of Charles Turner held by the Burton Historical Collection at the Detroit Public Library. Secondary sources include articles from the New York Times, Encyclopedia, .com, and the Library of Congress. If you enjoyed this video, kindly follow and like to stay up to date for our next story. Thanks for watching. See you next time.